NATO defence ministers are meeting in Brussels to agree on a plan to provide long-term security assistance to Ukraine.
Chinese government officials have criticised the EU over proposed tariff hikes on electric vehicles.
NATO defence ministers are meeting in Brussels to agree on a plan to provide long-term security assistance and military training to Ukraine. Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg said Ukraine needs predictability about the kinds of weapons and funds they can expect to receive.
I expect that the NATO ministers will agree a plan for a NATO security assistance and training for Ukraine, and we'll also discuss a long-term financial pledge that I expect Allied leaders will agree at the NATO summit in July.
Ministers are meeting over 2 days before a summit hosted by US President Joe Biden in July, where leaders are expected to announce more financial support for Ukraine. Allies are trying to bolster military support as Russian troops launch attacks along the more than 1,000-kilometer front line, taking advantage of a lengthy delay in US military aid.
The G7 summit has begun in Italy, with global conflict, particularly the Ukraine war, top of the agenda. Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni opens the meeting.
Cioè il G7 non è una fortezza chiusa in se stessa che deve magari difendersi da qualcuno, è un'offerta di valori che noi apriamo al mondo chiaramente per avere come obiettivo quello di uno sviluppo condiviso.
US President Joe Biden and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky are expected to sign a bilateral security agreement later on, which would use the interest earned on frozen Russian assets to help Ukraine's war effort.
And of course,
Although European officials have so far resisted confiscating the assets completely, an agreement has been reached between the G7 nations that the US can back a $50 billion loan to Ukraine using the frozen assets as collateral. But the US has said it will not commit troops directly to Ukraine's defense over fears it would be drawn into direct conflict with Russia. And although a political decision by the leaders has been made, the technical and legal details of the agreement still need to be worked out. And it's not straightforward. If the Russian assets are one day unfrozen, the windfall profits will no longer be able to be used to pay off the loan, requiring a burden-sharing agreement with other countries. But with a number of G7 leaders facing elections later in the year, the pressure to make progress on global security matters is high.
Parts of Ukraine have been plunged into darkness after Russian attacks on the energy grid has led to rolling blackouts across the country. In the capital, Kyiv, backup generators keep the lights on at home, as well as in shops and cafes. One sales assistant said she's been preparing her shop for the blackouts since last winter.
Тобто тільки вимикається світло, ми вмикаємо генератор, в нас є зарядні станції, і в принципі робота на там хвилин на 5, можливо, тільки заминка є.
President Volodymyr Zelensky says 9 gigawatts of energy generation have been wiped out in the attacks. In 2021, Ukraine consumed around 58 gigawatts of electricity.
По-перше, і кількість відвідувачів зменшилась. По-друге, ми ще не придбали генератор, і ми не можемо там постійно генерувати електроенергію. Але навіть якби й могли, то це додаткове вкладення в цю звичайну інфраструктуру, в буденну. Ми зробили там безперебійний інтернет з акумулятору, і люди все одно там приходять і працюють у нас, все чітко. Але там давати повний спектр напоїв і продукції ми не можемо.
Zelensky's been desperately appealing for more air defense support, partly to fend off the attacks. And on Tuesday, officials in the US said Ukraine would be sent another Patriot missile system.
French hostage Louis Arnault returned home after being released from 20 months imprisonment in Iran. He was greeted at a Paris airport by his family and the French foreign minister. Arnault was arrested in Iran in September of 2022 after being accused of taking part in nationwide protests following the death of Mahsa Amini. She was a young woman who died after being arrested for allegedly not wearing her headscarf to the standards of security forces.
Leaders of Europe's far-right political group Identity and Democracy gathered on Wednesday in the centre of Brussels to discuss their next move after the European elections. Some of those present included Italy's Matteo Salvini, France's Marine Le Pen, and Netherlands' Geert Wilders. Many are pushing for a merge with the European Conservatives and Reformist Party ECR.
Chega is in favor of a big right-wing bloc, but first of all, Chega is an ID party member, and we are happy being an ID party member.
The ID group now has 58 MEPs, while ECR has 77. Together, they could aim to be the second largest group of the European Parliament. The party's leaders also discussed the possibility of welcoming back Germany's AfD group.
Bulgaria's centre-right GERB party won the election, but their leading politician announced he will not be Prime Minister. GERB must also forge a coalition to form government. Pair this with voter fatigue and a fragmented parliament, and the Balkan country's political outlook appears murky.
Голяма част от хората загубиха вече вяра, че нещо ще се промени. До някъде и аз губя тази вяра. Ми се иска наистина.
От вътрешна гледна точка мисля, че нищо няма да се промени. И ние същи играчи 30 години, 35.
This was the country's 6th National Assembly vote in 3 years and was marked by 30% voter turnout. Experts are unsure about what this means for Bulgaria.
Кажем, че избирателите се уморяват от това непрекъснато да бъдат призовавани на избори. Естествено, резултата вече е на лице. Рекордно ниска избирателна активност и поява на, така бих казал, сериозни антисистемни заявки в партиите, присъстващи в следващия парламент.
New far-right extremist party Greatness won 5% of the public's votes, putting mainstream parties under pressure.
Подобно на Брекзит. Микротаргетиране. Не са важни всички, важни са конкретни хора, на които може да се повлияе. Цялата инвестиция, съвсем друг въпрос е откъде идва тя, се насочва към точно определени хора и резултатът видяхме в чужбина.
The vote was held on Sunday in parallel with European parliamentary elections, with both democratic exercises revealing a politically split country.
Turkish President Erdogan met with King Felipe VI of Spain in the Spanish capital Madrid to discuss global developments, including the ongoing crisis in the Gaza Strip. During the meeting, Erdogan said Turkish and Spanish relations would develop and deepen further. The two countries will hold the 8th Turkish and Spanish Intergovernmental Summit Thursday, with talks to be chaired by Erdogan and Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez.
A fight broke out in Italy's parliament during a vote on the government's controversial bill, which would give Italy's regions greater autonomy. It happened after Leonardo Donno, a member of the opposing Five Star Movement, handed an Italian flag to the Minister of Regional Affairs during the debate. As two clerks attempted to grab Donno, lawmakers from the League and Brothers of Italy parties joined the scuffle. Leonardo Donno was subsequently transported out of the chamber in a wheelchair by parliamentary medical staff.
Chinese government officials have blasted the EU over proposed tariff hikes on electric vehicles. The European Commission announced it would increase import duties from 10% to as much as 38% for Chinese automakers. Chinese ministry spokespeople have labelled it the wrong decision that could lead to a trade war.
不仅损害中国电动汽车产业合法权益，扰乱中欧新能源车互利合作，也将扭曲包括欧盟在内的全球汽车产业链供应链。欧方的做法涉嫌违反世贸组织规则，是赤裸裸的贸易保护主义行为。
Beijing has vowed to react to the additional duties, which has made European producers of cognac, pork and perfume nervous.
中方有必须捍卫的原则，那就是世贸组织规则和市场原则；也有必须维护的利益，那就是中国电动汽车产业和企业的合法权益。为此，我们将坚决采取一切必要措施。
Electric cars are the latest flashpoint in a broader dispute between the EU and China. Brussels claims Beijing's state support for green tech undercuts EU cars on price. These new duties, expected to be rolled out next month, are aimed at levelling the playing field.
Thousands of protesters poured into the streets to protest against President Milei's sweeping proposals to slash spending and boost his own powers. Argentina's Senate approved 2 divisive bills on Thursday morning, following an all-night voting marathon. The vote delivered a major boost to Milei, who faces tough resistance in Argentina's opposition-dominated Congress. The anger was audible ahead of the Senate vote in downtown Buenos Aires. Hundreds of federal security forces pushed back protesters with rounds of tear gas and water cannons.